Everybody, welcome back to the Journey Coach. I'm Dr. Tammy Mosier, and my goal is to help you be more productive and actually have a smoother journey, whether that's finishing your degree, whether it is advancing your career, getting your business in the shape you want it to be. And what I'm focusing on today is to help you start to build out Notion for yourself. So whatever you might want to see and how you want to organize yourself, the software is incredibly flexible and adaptable to you versus you having to adapt to it. So it's what I'm recommending for students to really try to capture and kind of encapsulate their productivity system, if you will. So with that in mind, many of you probably already watched the video with the overview of how I'm using Notion in terms of my weekly planning board. But I start with considering and creating the databases I need to fill in or actually feed up to that board. So we're going to do that today together. And what you will see over on the left-hand side of the screen is that I have a multitude of databases. You may not need all of those databases. I do this way because it allows me to really compartmentalize what I want to know about each of these different areas so that my pages don't get too huge, the database doesn't get too large. So what you see on the screen right now is my calendar view. So it's a calendar database. And if I switch the view over to a table, you can see what I have in the table and what I collect for each item. So what we're going to do is go in and actually start building one of these databases so you can see what that looks like, and then think about how you want to build your own and start taking that step. So I'm going to switch my workspace right now and go over into one I've already started. But what I want to do is I'm actually going to delete this calendar and we're going to start over. So you'll see in workspace, you can click the plus button to add a page. You can put that in the workspace or you can put it in the private area. So the differences are if you have a workspace, a team can see that workspace or any other databases in it. If it's in private, only you can see it. So it really does allow some flexibility to working with teams or even having a family Notion with different private workspaces and then a family workspace, which could be very useful. So I'm going to hit click and you'll see that now we have got an empty page. I don't like how this sets up in the middle of the page. I wish it would default to the left. So if you go up to the far right, beside favorite, you'll see 3 little dots. Those dots are useful everywhere you see them. So I'm going to click on that, and it means I can change the style of the page. That's not something that really matters to me right now, but I do want smaller text and a full width page. So this gives me this larger workspace and takes it to the left, which I really like. So I'm going to title this and type in calendar. And then I'm going to go down and I'm going to set up a table. And so you have different views. All of these are databases. It's just a different view of that database. When I'm setting one up, I like to start with the table view. So I'm going to click table. And so here's the beginning. This is what you are now starting with, right? So a calendar view, I want the name. I want a date. And I'm going to go down to property type, hover over that, and then I have all of these options. And I'm going to pick date. Then I'm going to pick week. And this is a number field. And that becomes important in how I sort and filter. So I put the week number on this and action items. Then I want day. So this is also important, and this is a single select field. So multi-select would let me add multiple things to it, but select just lets me choose one. So I'm going to put my day there because whatever date I choose, I know what day of the week that is. Right now, you'll notice I've grabbed up here on the top. So it's similar to working with an Excel spreadsheet. I can make this a larger or smaller area. So I'm going to shrink these down a little bit. I don't need them to be that large. I'm going to add location. And I do this because this allows me to put something like Zoom, CPP building, room 207, those types of things that I need to know for actual meetings. Meeting leader. I add this one because I want to know who's responsible for setting this up. And I leave text instead of person. So person is a field over here, but for the person field to work, you have to have multiple team members associated with this space. That's who's on your list. It's not like your general contacts. So I leave it as a text field. This also allows me to put my own name and know for certain that I'm in charge of it. Time. And I drag the time over here by date. And so that's just something I type in. You can add the time in your date field. So if I go and click in here to add a date, you'll notice that I can include a time. And that lets me put what time it starts, but not what time it ends. And so for me, that's not as useful because I really need to know this is going to last 2 hours, 3 hours, because again, this is about scheduling my time. So I'm going to change this. I don't want to include a time there. I'm going to type it in the field. I want a URL field. Now this is because a lot of our meetings right now are over Zoom or some other platform of that nature, and I need a link to that meeting. So I'm going to put URL, and that way I can just put the Zoom link in there, and it is now associated with this calendar item. And then I'm going to have a notes checkbox. And I use that in my system. You may not need this. The notes checkbox lets me actually connect to another database, another view of my calendar that just lets me see items that have notes associated because they're meetings. Now, the two other fields I add here is a project field. And for a project field, I actually want to be able to create a relationship between this database and my projects database. And what that will let me do is go, oh, I have this meeting today and it's a part of this project. So instead of a text property type, I'm going to actually go to the advanced list and pick relationship. And I've already created a projects database here, and it's right here. So I'm just going to collect that and go create relationship. And when we go to projects, this is a database I already had the basics set up here, and I click projects, you'll see it's actually related to calendar. So now when I put something on the calendar, if it's a part of this project, it will also show up here. So that's the start of the calendar database, and gives you the basics, I think, of what you need to set up my system so that what you're doing you can pull into a weekly planner. So let's go back to my weekly planner for a moment, and I'll show you my calendar. So I embedded this as an inline embedded table view of my calendar. So you see this little arrow here beside the calendar? That means that's connected to the database calendar. And so what I'm doing is just pulling that information into my weekly view. And I set up a template for this. So once we get the databases put together, I'm going to help you start to build out the template for your week view, which then you could make it any type of view you wanted. But now you can see I have these on my calendar this week. And over to the far right, I've got this filtered by week. So this is week 17. That's why having the week number on these is so important, because that week number allows me to filter by that. And then I've hit the three little dots and go down to group by. And when I group by, it will let you group by any of your select database fields. So I had the day set up as a select field, so I can group by day. So now what I have is this week's calendar with the items, and they're grouped by the day and filtered by the week. And then I've chosen the properties I want to see on this card view. So this is a gallery, a Kanban board view of it actually. And I tell it through the properties, so I click the three dots again, go down to properties, and it shows you right here what properties I have clicked on. So you'll see I want the date, the time, and if I don't like where that's sitting on the card, so if you watch the card for a minute, I'm going to say I want the area up top. So I move the area, and see it move on the card. So you can rearrange these just by dragging. There's also another area to really think of. There's the three dots that are vertical, and there's two sets of them. And so that's where you can click to drag. So I actually want that under the URL, so I can move that around again. I have the URL for meetings there, so I can just click that URL on the little Kanban board card and it immediately opens it up. So you can really, and you can also, the card preview can look different. So I can have a none, I can have a page cover, I can have page content there. And so if I do page content, that shows you, it kind of changes that up. I don't have page covers on these, so that's why we aren't getting kind of a prettier picture. And then I have a small card size, but you can also make that different sizes. So this really shows you kind of how I've got this set up. Now, I can also click into these cards. So when this meeting comes up, I have a template that I use for meetings. And so when I start a new one, this opens up. Now these right here are the property fields that we just set into our database, right? So in the table, when we were adding the date time field, this pops up on this card. When I set up a new meeting or a new scheduled activity, then these come up for me to fill in. So date, time, this is why I like the text, so I can type it in like that. I know how long that is. The day, which is a field, right? I've got them grouped by this. The week number, who is in charge of this meeting, that it's a Zoom meeting, but I don't have a URL for that yet. That's why it's not on the card and showing up. The meeting ID, if it's a Zoom meeting, they have meeting IDs, you might need something different. The area this is a part of, if there's a project, and this does not have a project associated with it, it's just an area of service for me. If there's notes, I can click that, and then I actually do have tags that I can use. If I wanted to add a new property for my calendar, I could do that right here on the fly. And then I have my setup, that's a template for meetings. So this is how you can then take a database you set up and start to filter, sort, group by to get the view you want. So here's the next view, which is our actions. Now I've got this filtered and sorted differently. But let's go back over to our other workspace and look at our action items list and start to look at how we want to set that table up, right? So I've got a done, so I can check it off as done. And I actually do one of my filters moves that on my board as I finish things. The name, date, the importance. Now I use importance as a field. This is how I group them on that view in my week, is by importance. And the options I have here: today, tomorrow, sometime, end of week. You could have a different setup here. You could have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if you actually wanted to assign a week to it. So that, I mean, an actual day of the week to it. That's up to you. Person, if there is one that you need to associate here. The area and the project, so these are relational fields. So if I go here, I can look at this and set it up. I go to property type, advanced relation, and then I can choose that other data. Now you have to have the database you want it to connect to ready, but if you do and hit select a database, and then you can choose project, and then when you're filling out one of these action items, you can choose which project it connects to. The week number, again, that's one of my main filter criteria, so that's really important to put on there. URL, I don't always need that, but I like to have it there just in case I want to add something, but you may not, so you might not want to add it. I also have a few other items, so let's look at this. I want to know what kind of mental state I need to be in when I do this. So I'm going to do this as a select box, and then I'm going to do, it's quick, which for me means very little mental activity. I have to think, so thinking's involved, but thinking to me means I can multitask, I may be doing other items because I'm thinking something through. So that might be a project like setting up these databases. It's a thinking process. It may take some time, but I'm not totally just doing that. And focused, meaning that when I'm working on this particular action item, I have to be all in. So I can set those up. And so now if you go here and go configure options, you can see what I've got available. And if you go over to the three little dots, right, click on that. I can delete this if I don't want it anymore. I can change its color. I can change what it's actually saying. So I have a lot of flexibility there to go back and change some things if I want to. Some others I look at is status. So this is also a select. So I may look at things like in progress, ongoing, not started, and so if I look here in configure options, I've got that available. So same thing. Now I can look at that and change any of those options. You don't have to have the status bar. I find it useful because if it's in progress and thinking, that means I've started it. It's just going to take a little bit. I also use waiting, and waiting is important to me because that may be something I've started, but I'm waiting on somebody else to take a step, send an email, and so it's in progress. So let's look at a few other things I like to have. So I like to have a next in line and an after. And so let me show you what these do for you. So when I'm looking at after, this means I want to set up a string of tasks. So after is going to be a relationship, but it's going to be a relationship with this exact same database. So this is called action item. That's this database we're setting up. And now that I've clicked the same database that we're in, I have a few other options here. I can create a new property, use this option when modeling a parent task and child task properties in a task database, or use the same property, no syncing. I want to sync, and so I'm going to click create new property, create relation. And so I'm going to do this again. Okay, so now what I'm going to do with this is let's set one more on here, complete assignment 2. So complete assignment 1 is going to have a next in line, and it's complete assignment 2, right? And then complete assignment 2 is going to be after 1, and then if I had another one. Now where this helps is when I want to have a string of tasks, and until I complete one, I can't really start on the other. So I don't want all of them just crowding into my action item list every week when I don't know when I may get the first item done. So this allows you to really kind of track things in a string. And so let me show you what that looks like for me on my task list. So here's an item that has an item that follows it. So I'm going to go back over to properties, and you'll see after and next in line are not clicked. I'm going to click next in line, and you'll see that now when I look at all of my cards, this particular item has a following item. So when I get ready to say this is done for the week, I can click on that to open it, and I can add a week and let me go right here. I can go to this item and open it up and go, now you see this has an after and a next in line. Now I need to put a week number. Let's say I did get the second item done this week. So what I want to do is go into here and add a new week number. So next week 18 and put a date on it. That's a little more advanced, but what it allows me to do is really start to see kind of this string of items, and instead of having all of these on cards, which if I got behind this week and didn't get this done, then I wouldn't want that item popping up next week. I'd want to move this one to the next week. So it keeps it very clean in terms of action items, and if we look here at this, those are all part of a CPQ project. So I want to add one more filter property here, so I'm going to add a filter, and it's going to be by project and CPHQ, and so here they are. So this is this project's action items, and you can see how these first two have a week assigned to them, week number and date, and they all have the after and next in line. So that makes it very easy for me to click on that, set the week number. So it sets up a string for you to work with that makes it much easier for you to kind of set up these templates in a way that makes sense. So for action items, we now have kind of the basics for what we need for you to set up your database so that we've got views. So what I'm going to leave you with today is what I want you to do next is I want you to think about, okay, what properties do I want in my calendar view, and build that out. Then what properties do I want on my action item view, and build that out. And then if you are in school specifically, I strongly believe in projects and organizing by project, but not everybody may want to do that. You need a database for projects. And if you're in school, your projects just might simply be every class you take gets put on here. And I'll help you build out then what your templates could look like for your classes so you can keep everything together. And go in and just open a class page and be able to see everything going on with that class very easily for you as a project. So if you want a project database, then same thing. You'll start it just like we did the calendar and the action items, label it projects, and get the names down, and then think about what you want to actually have connected together. And you'll see the relationships we set up actually went ahead and created the reciprocal relationship on this database. So if you want to connect it in one place, it will automatically add that connection to the other database as you go. So for projects, think through what you would like these properties to be. And I'll just leave you with a quick view of what my properties look like in projects, so that if you want to use something similar, you can. And you set the database up the same way I just showed you, right? So I have a time, so short-term, ongoing, long-term, on hold. So I kind of look at my projects that way. Short-term for me is 3 to 6 months. Long-term, I'm looking at over 6 months to multiple years. Ongoing, something that really doesn't change. That project always exists. What I'm doing in that project may shift, but the project is still there. And then I have on hold, so projects where I'm like, it's a project I want to work on. I've maybe even gotten started on it, but because of what's going on right now, I cannot work on it. So I'm just going to put it on hold. Connection to my area. I also have a progress bar. And so I will help you with that. You've got to set up the roll up, and then you can build a formula. So this is the formula to actually put together this progress bar. And that's a little more advanced. If you want something like that, we'll go over that as we move forward. You could also go to William Nutt's Notion videos, because he does a lot with formulas. So he could help you go ahead and take that step if you want to. I have them related to their weekly agendas. So any weekly agenda, like this project right here, is shown up on multiple weekly agendas. I have a tag. I haven't really used tags for much yet, so tags may be going away eventually in my system. A URL, it's related to my monthly calendar, related to notes, and that's another database I have, and related to action items. And that's what I have in my project database, those particular key areas. So if you want one, that would be my suggestion to get started, and you could add a little different views. Now, just to show you how views can vary, I actually have gallery views set up of projects in ongoing, short-term, long-term, and hold. So I use those time selections to actually set up the gallery views. So these are ongoing projects. These are short-term projects. Long-term projects. My hold gallery. So as you start to look at this, you can see how I've just got different views, and then I can just go back to my table view of my projects. So this will get you started. Think through what you want to do, jot some notes, watch this video, build while you're watching. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them, and then we'll pick up from here in the next video. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.